Hi, welcome to my podcast, Becoming a Cut Flower Grower. I'm your host, Lydia, and I'm here to share my year of growing and selling cut flowers. I'll be giving you the lowdown on everything I'm doing and sharing all the highs and lows, the good times and the inevitable disasters, all in real time. Join me on my cut flower journey, starting right now. Hello and welcome to this episode. It is Friday the 20th of June in the evening. We are officially now in Heatwave. It's absolutely baking out there. I didn't think it was too bad today because we had a little bit of cloud cover, like a very fine kind of light covering. But yesterday was absolutely boiling, and tomorrow promises to be even hotter. So it's quite a challenge for everything, just never mind me and the dog and the chickens and the ducks and all of the plants and then all the seedlings as well. So it is a full-time job just keeping everybody alive and happy. We'll get there. I hope the weather is working in your favor wherever you are. And you've got plenty of water because that's the most important thing. Now, I want to start with some really exciting news, some good news. So, one of the highs of my growing year so far, I have sold my first batch of 20 stems. I was thinking, in the winter that I'd be doing hundreds of stems per week. And then obviously when I got back from my Cornwall trip, I was thinking I'm never going to be able to sell anything. And here we are 5 days later, and I've just sold 20 stems to my wedding florist, which is really, really exciting. They were the calendulas. So if you were listening to the last episode, you'll know I got back and I was distinctly underwhelmed with how everything had got on. And I didn't think I'd have anything ready for weeks. But with a bit of water this week, because I've been around, the calendulas were ready to cut, and they were very short. So they are supposed to be 1.5 foot tall, the plants, and that is correct. That is not to say that the stem length is going to be that. So the maximum stem length that I had on the plants was about 20 centimeters, so between 15 and 20 centimeters. So I got in touch with my florist at the start of the week just to say I'm back. What might you need? I haven't got very much, and she sent me a mood board for a wedding she's doing this weekend. And would you believe my little calendulas happen to be on the mood board? So I said, perfect. I've got some, but they're only this length. And she said, that's fine. She can use them. So I have spent, well, the last 5 days stressing about it, because as soon as somebody says, oh, yes, I'll buy them, you then got to keep them alive and cut them at exactly the right time and make sure they're all watered properly and no bugs arrive and nobody walks over them. So I've been watching them like a hawk this week, and I've actually cut them over a period of a couple of days just to kind of cover my back. Now, the great thing about weddings, supplying for weddings, is that you're only supplying a plant or a flower that's got to last for, I don't know, 1 or 2 days at the most. And then it's not the end of the world if they keel over, because it's really like supplying for an event. Whereas obviously, if you're cutting, I say obviously, I don't know what I'm doing here. I just say it because I don't know why I say it. I'm sorry. If you're cutting for a bouquet, the expectation is that they're going to last longer than a couple of days. But I was thinking, well, I'm going to hedge my bets and cut some stems on Wednesday night, and then I can cut some more on Thursday, knowing that I was delivering to the florist on Friday morning. And I didn't want to wait until Thursday night just in case anything went wrong. So I kind of did it in 2 batches, and it was absolutely fine. I stripped the leaves on the plot so I can compost them, and then just left a couple near the actual flower itself, and the florist was happy with that. I know when the florists get them from the wholesalers, the entire stem is covered in foliage, and so the florists have to spend time stripping it. And I thought to myself, well, anything I'm going to be supplying, I'm going to strip it myself because I can use the leaves on the compost. And I just sort of automatically strip as I'm cutting. So it doesn't take me any more time really, and I'd rather have the plant material. Um, and I can't use anything that the florist might have because the flowers have been imported and they could have all sorts of nasty things on them. So the most stressful thing about the whole operation actually was delivering them, because I've got this car where the seats go down, and that's fine. So you have like a level bit, and then there's a slightly raised bit where the seats sort of go up on an angle. So I had them in little vases. Again, the florist goes to wholesalers and they pick stuff up in bunches and they just load them in the back of the car and then drive them home. I thought, well, I can't really do that with mine. And stems that are only 20 centimeters long, like you can't put them in a bucket because they just fall over and get wet and get messy. So they had to stay upright. So I put them in little tiny bud vases. And then, of course, I had to transport them, and I didn't want anything touching anything else, but I didn't want the vases falling over. So it took me, I think, longer than any money that I would have made from the sale of these things, just getting them in the car upright and that they weren't going to fall over and that the flower heads didn't get damaged. So I definitely need to look to get some buckets. The florists all use square buckets so they don't fall over. Um, but apparently you can only hire those florist square buckets. You can't actually buy them. I don't know if there are any sculling around on the internet. I might have a look, but otherwise I need to get some kind of frame structure built in the car so that things don't topple over, because that was the most nerve-wracking part of the whole thing. And just before you get to where the florist is based, there are all these speed bumps, and they're those really narrow, quite high ones where the springs on my car just jangle every time I go over them, and I could hear these vases just bouncing as I was going over them. There's no good way of going over them. It is what it is. But we got there and they were fine, and I handed them over. The florist is very happy with them, and now I'm going to invoice her for that. And I also took a couple of stems of roses up. So I'm not growing roses in the plot. This is a Rolldale that's in my garden, and I did say to myself, don't cut anything from the garden to sell, because if you start doing it, you will end up ransacking your entire garden, and the business has to be separate from my home life. And I want to be able to sit in the garden and it not be completely naked of plants. But these roses, the Rolldales, were so perfect for the wedding color scheme. I thought I've got to at least take them, and if the florist doesn't want them, it's fine, but at least I can show her that I can grow roses and this is what they're like. And they also have the most stunning smell. It's very subtle. You do have to put your face right into the bloom, but it's gorgeous. So I put a couple of stems in the car, and they're like spray roses in a way. There was three or four um, flowers. Oh goodness me, losing my brain here. 3 or 4 flowers on each stem. So I took them up, and the florist really loved them. So she bought them from me, which is great. So I thought, well, that's brilliant. And also the other tricky thing about it was pricing these calendula stems. So these are the first calendula I've ever grown or sold. And it's the first time that I've sold anything to this florist. And it's the first time I've sold anything as short as 20 centimeters. And I have said to the florist that, we're going to negotiate all the prices. We'll come up with something this year that we're completely happy with. And then when I have a better understanding at the end of this year, and I go through the numbers and work out how much it's actually cost me to produce these plants, then perhaps when I do the pricing this time next year, it might look a little bit different. So, in order to help me out, the florist sent me a couple of screenshots from where she orders her flowers, and that gave me the pricing for what she was looking at buying. And I was thinking, well, mine need to be a similar or slightly higher price. And also, everything on the wholesale websites, you have to add VAT to it, our sales tax. Um, So anyway, we worked something out, and I told her what I thought I wanted, and she said that's absolutely fine. And what you're supposed to be doing is working out how much it actually costs you to produce the product. But I just think, unless I'm missing a trick here, please let me know if you know any better. That's impossible until you've got a whole year's worth of data, surely. Because I have written down every single minute that I've spent on these calendulas this year, and it came to a total of 31 minutes. And I have got 39 plants. So that's basically 1 minute of time per plant. But I don't know how many stems I'm going to get from the plants. And so therefore I can't calculate the costs that it's taken me to produce them either per plant or per square meter. So I guess I'll know that number at the end of the season. I'll know how many stems I've cut from those plants, and then I'll be able to price, or not price it, but at least know what the production costs are, which helps when I work out the profit margins, I guess. But then if you're benchmarking against what wholesaler would pay, it swings and roundabouts. So there's no point me going in and saying, oh, I want £1 a stem for them because that's how much it's cost me to produce. And she's going to turn around and say, well, I'm not paying £1 a stem for 20 centimetres of marigold. So, yeah, that was a bit tricky. But anyway, that's how I worked out my pricing. And I was happy with it. We got off to a great start. And that's the most important thing. It is not worth having some kind of battle over 20 stems of 20 centimetres just to make a bit more money. So that is super exciting. And I'm really, really pleased with that. That is the only thing I have managed to sell, by the way. I have been cutting loads of cornflowers. They're absolutely beautiful. Like, I love them. The white ones and blue ones. And then every so often there'll be a completely random coloured one, which I just love. And I've actually got one that's kind of white and a pale pink, which is oddly really, really pretty. So what I thought I would do this week is practice my hand ties. So as you know, this is not my forte. And I was thinking to myself, or have been for months, if I have to sell everything to a market, at a farmer's market, rather than through the florist, I really have to practice the hand tie. So it was baking hot yesterday, and I was at home, and I thought I'll go and sit in the sun and just relax. Well, that lasted 10 minutes until I was bored to tears and had to get up and do something. So I thought, I know, I'll watch loads of YouTube videos about how to do hand ties. So I did, and I felt really confident. And I went outside and I got all my materials, which is basically loads of cornflowers. And I thought, oh, I need some foliage just to help with this. So whizzed around the garden, stripped some bits out, which is, again, not what I'm supposed to be doing because it's my garden, and practiced. And honestly, my neighbours must have wondered what on earth I was doing, because in order to remember the technique, I kept saying it out loud. So I was like, right, hold your hands still. Uh, um, quarter turn, twist it, wiggle it over and over again for about 2 hours because I couldn't get the hang of it. So if they were listening, I'm sorry, I wasn't doing anything dodgy. I was literally just trying to do this. And it was so difficult. And I realized afterwards it's because I'm working with really, really thin stems. So in order to get a bouquet of any decent size, because for some reason I can't do things small, so I have to do everything big. So I was thinking to myself, oh, I'm going to end up with like a huge, fantastic, spirally, massive bouquet. Well, let me tell you, that is really tricky if you're practicing with cornflowers, because the stems are so thin. And even with the foliage that I had, it was very challenging. And also, I don't want to break the cornflower stems, but when you're putting them right up against some fat bits of foliage, it can go horribly wrong. Anyway, I wasn't going to let it beat me. I managed to do 2 bouquets, and I came up against 2 problems. So I did manage to get the spiraling to work, but what I found was that when I was tying the bunch together with string, that all the stems ended up poker straight, not being all splayed out at the bottom. So that was my first problem. And the second problem was wrapping them with paper. So I'd been out and bought a roll of brown paper from the shop, and I was very proud of myself. And I thought, now I've got this, I'm going to be able to do the wrapping, no problem. Well, let me tell you, it's a lot harder than it looks. So the first bunch ended up with sort of sunken deep within this well of paper. So there was about 4 inches of paper sticking out the top. So when I did the second bunch, I thought, okay, just cut a smaller piece of paper so the flowers will sit higher. And the second bunch then ended up with what looks like a really silly little skirt of brown paper, nowhere near enough. And I was doing the technique that I've seen on the YouTube videos, which is like two separate pieces of brown paper, with the crease in them, so you have all of these points. And there was just sort of proportionally, I think, more paper than flowers. So when I went to see the florist this morning, I said, please to help me with this. Where am I going wrong? And so she talked me through it, and she's given me some pointers for that, which is very useful. The main pointers seem to be use fatter stems. So when I turned up, she was working with peonies and what else did she have? She had some lisianthus and some lupins, and basically everything was really fat. So she had at one point like 5 or 6 stems in her hand, and the bunch was bigger than what I'd done with about 40 cornflowers. So fat stems, obviously bigger bouquet. And she also said to me, don't worry about doing a sort of 360-degree traditional bouquet if you're selling them in a market. It's okay to do it kind of flat fronted. And she doesn't always do that quarter turn every time either. She just kind of holds it in her hand and positions them. So that was also quite tricky to master, because as soon as you do the quarter turn, everything just goes completely weird. And she did help me work out where I'm going wrong when I'm tying them up. I think I was holding them in the wrong place, and the further down you hold them, the more that the stems were going to stay together. So that was particularly helpful. And then she showed me how to do the paper, and she just uses one piece of paper, which is great, and does a small fold in the bottom part of it so that you end up with a pointy bit behind at the back of the flowers, which look really nice. And then it's not, overwhelmingly paper, which is, just silly. So some very helpful pointers there. I shall carry on practicing, but I do need to get my hands on some more fat stems. So hopefully I've got some other bits. And maybe I just need to practice with foliage, and just not worry about using these very thin stems, because it's very difficult with very thin stems. What else? So I had a couple of hours with Richard, my Dahlia expert, on Tuesday, and that was absolutely fascinating because Richard's got all his out. He's got about 150 in the ground, and they are already flowering. And mine are not even thinking about flowering. So between us, we have two separate problems. So he grows to exhibit, and I'm growing to sell. So I should be having ones flowering now in order to sell them. And his really needs to slow down because all of the Dahlia shows in the UK are at the end of August, beginning of September. And so he doesn't actually need blooms now, and he can't do anything with them. He's got no outlet for them. He gives them away, which is lovely and kind, but he doesn't really need the plant putting all its energy into flowers right now, because we've got another 2 months before the shows even start. What he is doing at the moment is foliar feeds. He starts these beginning of June, mid-June, and he uses one watering can for 8 plants, and he puts Miracle Grow in there. Now, as I'm chemical free, I'm not going to be doing that, so I'll be doing seaweed feeds, but it probably means my plants aren't going to be probably as wumphy as his are, because obviously Miracle Grow is like speed for plants. He said to me, don't disbud any more than I already have, so I've taken out the central leader of mine. He does a very complicated disbudding and everything process, which is entirely geared up to exhibiting. So I told him what I'd done, and he said, fine, don't disbud anything else. Let them all flower now based on the structures that I have, so that I have as many cut flowers as possible. He's also planted his in a different way this year, which is a bit odd because I've done mine based on how he showed me how he did his last year, which is in rows 2 foot apart. Every plant is 2 foot apart, and then there's a 2 foot walkway between them. What he's done this year is he's staggered all of the plants in this row of 2. So instead of having one plant directly opposite the neighbor, he's done like a zigzag pattern, which makes a lot more sense because each plant has got just that little bit more breathing space, and would probably be better than what I've done, because there's a danger that you could just reverse into things. So that was interesting. He told me not to overwater my rooted cuttings. So he and I both ordered from Halls of Heaven this year. and I only ordered 7, as you know, and he had ordered about 60 or something. So he was showing me his, and in fact, some of his are actually flowering now, which is pretty awesome because mine are still in the pots that I potted them on into when I got them. To be fair to me, I did get mine a few weeks after him. But yeah, that's the only excuse I have. Anyway, he said don't overwater them because the roots will just drown. So I'm just being a little bit more cautious about what I do now. But again, the flip side is it's so blisteringly hot out there. You also don't want them to dry out because they've got quite a bit of foliage. Anyway, I took one of the pots off and took a photo of the roots and sent it to him when I got home. And he said, "Oh, they're doing fine. Don't worry about them." So that was great. So I will keep you posted with my next visit. He and I are planning, well, he's always exhibiting every year. That is what he does. But we're planning for me to exhibit some of my flowers in a show on the end of August. So I'll keep you posted on that. It's not the top priority for me because obviously selling them for the cut flowers is, but I wouldn't mind taking part in some shows because I just love the buzz of shows. And I'm quite a competitive person and I'd just love to have a go. And to be honest, the number of people entering these Dahlia classes is falling off a cliff here. And lots of local shows are either cutting the number of Dahlia classes they do or they're just reducing them entirely. And we'll eventually get to a point where there won't be any Dahlia classes and there might not even be any local flower shows because, the old growers are dying off and there isn't a massive demand. Young people are just not taking it up, which is such a shame because these guys like Richard have the most enormous knowledge bank of information. And, people like him, he's incredibly keen to pass it all on. And there is a skill to it. We're at risk of getting to a point where younger people will not know how to work with flowers like dahlias and just end up buying them from a garden centre, and that seems an incredible shame to me because they're a fascinating plant. I love watching mine. I can't wait for them to flower. It's so exciting. Okay, so what else did I have to say? Oh yes, I was going to tell you all about my visit to a flower grower in Cornwall last week. This was so much fun. This was literally like one of the highlights of my week. And I knew there would be growers down in Cornwall, and I really, really wanted to go and visit one. So I went on the Flowers from the Farm website. This isn't a plug for them because I'm not a member. I went on the Flowers from the Farm website, and there is a box where you put the postcode in for where you want to get cut flowers from, and it could be anywhere in the country. And I typed in the postcode where we're staying, and it brought up a couple of options. And I literally just picked one and WhatsApped the owner and said, "Hi, I'm on holiday here for the rest of the week. I'm a grower. Here's my website. Here's my Instagram. I'm not a serial killer. Would you have any time to just have a chat and I could have a look at your plot and what you're doing?" So I contacted Rowena at Grays and Green Flowers near Boscastle. And Rowena is an absolute superstar because she said yes. And she fitted me in to the end of the week, which was amazing because she didn't know me at all. And it was just really nice of her. We had 45 minutes together and she showed me her plot. And I was really impressed with her, with the setup. It was beautiful. It was lovely. And she was just so kind and generous with her time. So there were a number of key learnings from this. I mean, this is the first cut flower setup that I've seen. And it was absolutely fascinating to see how other people do it. Now, she grows in raised beds and she's using stock fencing as a support. And then she'll put a cover like Enviromesh over the stock fencing in order to protect the plants. Now, one of the main things she's done differently from me is that she got her plants out astonishingly early in the season. Like I think when I was still sowing stuff, she was actually planting it out. And she's absolutely 100% right. I mean, it seemed so obvious when I saw it. I was like, I can't believe I got this so wrong. So here's me cosseting everybody in the greenhouse and then waiting until the crucial moment to plant them out. Rowena stuffed hers out like, I don't know, February time. And they've done brilliantly. Everything was like enormous. I couldn't believe the size of it. Her Nigella was finishing. I mean, my guys, as you know, are still just thinking about it. They've only just budded up. So she had all sorts of beautiful things out and they were all, three and a half foot tall. Everything was just flourishing, and she is selling at market already. She does a farmer's market on Sundays in Boscastle, and I just couldn't believe how far advanced everything was. Now, clearly, as we know, they have a ton of water there. So watering is not the limiting factor for them. And it's been very warm this year. So everything is just out under the enviromesh, underneath that stock fencing. And she's using like cattle stock fencing. So with the sort of rectangular shaped holes. And she makes a dome over the wooden frame of the raised bed. And then the enviromesh goes over the top. And then once they're up, she just takes the mesh off and off they go. She had the most stunning bunny tails as well. Oh my goodness, they were beautiful. She had some wonderful mint. So she pointed out, the apple mint. And in fact, I bought a couple of apple mints from the Eden Project when I was in Cornwall. So I have got some of that. She had a beautiful cold frame out back, not a cold frame, sorry, a greenhouse that she was growing everything in. So I had a peek in there, and she's doing everything like properly in really, really big seed trays. And she's still sowing to get this successional sowing. What she did have that I was very envious of was standpipes, about every 2 or 3 beds with hose pipes attached. So I guess if they have a day when it doesn't rain, she can water, and I was really jealous about that. Um, and what else was there that I wanted to tell you about? Oh yes, she said to me, if you can be part of a flower hub. So she's part of a local hub where they a whole pool of kind of growers get together, bring all the product to one place, and then the florists can come and buy from that place instead of the florists all having to drive around or you having to deliver everything. And she highly recommended that. And there is a story to say with that, because I'm hopefully just about to join a local hub that has been set up here. I don't think it's starting yet. I think it's starting this summer. We're in summer, but I don't know exactly when. Anyway, I'm going to a meeting in a week's time about joining this hub of local growers. So I've just been invited to join a WhatsApp group of local growers. I was invited by a lady called Rachel who grows locally, and was just blown away that I even got invited to join that. Amazing. But anyway, the point is, Rowena from Cornwall said, if you can get into a hub, get into a hub, because you're connected, and then it's much easier to get things out in front of the florist. So all in all, an extremely useful visit, and I would encourage you to make contact with growers near you. If you're thinking about setting up a cut flower patch or garden or plot, or even if you're doing one at the moment and it's year one, just get in touch with some people. I can't believe anybody's going to say no, because if anybody messaged me and said, oh, can I come and have a look? I would say, yeah, of course you can. And I'm not going to charge you £200 for coming either, which some places do. And, that's a thing, because they do talks and tours, and maybe they give you lunch, and it's all really nice, and you make a bouquet, and that's great. But sometimes, especially if you're just starting out, like I think in the first couple of years, I would want to have eyes on as many different plots and see how everybody's doing it as possible, without having to pay hundreds of pounds. Like, I don't want lunch and a glass of wine. I want to just come and pick your brains and see what you're doing. And I would do that if anybody contacted me. I would say, yeah, sure, come and have a look. Like, I'll tell you what I know. I'm not an expert, as you know, but I've been contacted by another lady who said, come and have a look at my plot anytime you like. I think it's so nice and kind and generous of people. So these growers are out there. They are happy to have visitors, and if someone says to you no, well, don't take it personally, because sometimes people have a lot going on, or personal problems, or commitments and stuff. Sometimes it genuinely is not a good time to have someone you don't know tramping around your field, but odds on they're going to say yes. So be brave, message them, say, can I just come and have a look? And take it from there, because it is well worth it. And I'm enormously grateful to Rowena. I picked up some tips that I'm going to take on board, and I am so, so very grateful. So thank you to Rowena. So the final thing I want to talk about today is tulips. So I mentioned this in the last episode. I had a question from one of my listeners, and I'm very happy to answer questions. And she said, what are you going to be doing for tulips next year? Because pre-orders are opening and she wants to put an order in. So let me talk you through what I'm planning on doing. And this is really just a small plan at this stage. I have not done my final list and I've not put an order in yet. A couple of things. You want to choose, or I'm going to choose tulips that people cannot get their hands on unless they grow them themselves or they go to a fancy wholesaler. So I'm not going to grow anything that you could find in a supermarket or your average shop. So I'm going to go really heavy on the parrot type of tulip, which is those really over the top crazy things, and the peony type. They're the two main ones that I'm going to focus on. And the peonies are basically like doubles and they look like peonies. And the third type is the viridiflora, which have these lovely long kind of tall flowers, and then they kind of flute out like a I don't know, Google them. I'm not describing them very well, but that's the viridiflora. So those are the three types that you are not going to find in a supermarket, and you're actually pretty unlikely to find in a florist unless they've ordered them in for an event or a wedding, because they're really quite outlandish and quite special. Also, I'm going to order ones that have a really decent stem length. Now, the trick with the tulips, I have been told, is when you pull them up with the bulb on and you throw the bulbs away. Now, the first time I heard about this, I was horrified, like, oh my goodness, I'm not throwing the bulbs away. I'm going to keep them. I'm going to replant them. Tulip bulbs are not all perennial. Some of them will come back for a couple of years. I've got apricot beauty sculling around outside that I've had for years. Some of them come up, some of them just vanish. But tulips are not reliably perennial. And if you're going to be selling them for cut flowers, you want the very best stock. So, like I say to my clients when I do containers and displays, we're going to buy fresh every year. We'll put the old bulbs in the beds. And if they come up, great. If they don't, it doesn't matter. But we're not going to use old stock for outside your front door because we cannot guarantee that they're going to come back. So that is the rule. So when you're pulling them up, when I'm going to be pulling them up next year, they're going to be coming up with the bulb. So you're going to have an even nicer, longer stem. Because if you've ever tried to cut tulips at the base while the bulb is still in the ground, you'll know that there's a hoo-ha with the leaves and it's quite difficult to get right down there. So if you just pull the whole thing up, you can just chop the bulb off and you've got a nice long stem. But you really want long stems anyway. So some of them, like Doll's Minuet, which is a viridiflora, is a 55 centimeter stem length. Now, this is not set in stone, right? These are guideline figures for what the plants are going to do. But as you know, nothing goes according to plan, and weather conditions and when you plant them and how you plant them and the soil that they're in and the aspect and everything else can affect the stem length. So you can't guarantee it, but we're aiming for tall stems unless you're going to be doing bud vases and small hand-tied little posies, in which case you could buy a selection of bulb lengths. It's not the most important thing in the world. But if you're going to be selling into event or wedding florists, they're going to want to start off with a really decent stem length because they can always cut it down, but you can't make the short ones longer. I always buy a selection of tulips, which are earlies, mids, and lates. Again, all of that can change depending on what kind of winter you have. And if you sometimes end up really busy in November, December, and you don't get them in time, you'll find that your earlies will arrive when the mids would arrive because you put them in late, which often happens to me. I don't mind. It's not a problem because then you just get tulips later. It's great. But I'm not going to be making that mistake this year because I need stuff to sell as early as possible. So I'll be putting them in as early as possible. So they're like the initial first criteria. Buy something really unusual that people are not going to be able to find elsewhere. Buy them so that you have a really long season of interest, early season ones, mid and late, and get ones that have really super long stems unless you particularly want shorter ones. So that's my three basic rules for how to even choose before you even get excited about which ones to choose. When it comes to like the particular colors to choose from, this is a little tiny bit more complicated. And you could make it even more complicated by trying to second guess what the wedding season is going to be doing next year or the year after. And you need to do a bit of research on this. You can't just buy all your favorite colors. So you might want to choose a limited palette of, say, flowers that are maybe 3 shades apart, so that when you put them all together, like 3 shades on the color wheel apart, you can put an arrangement of tulips together that will look absolutely stunning if you have to sell them. If you're selling them to wedding and event florists, they should know by now what the color schemes are for their weddings in 2026. So that's a conversation that I'm going to have with my florist before I place a single order. Is no point me ordering all pinks if everybody's going green and white next year. So this decision, the colours, depends very much on what your outlet is. You can order what you like if you're going to sell it yourself down at a farmer's market or for a CSA. But if you're selling it to a florist, you're going to need to know what they want. If you are not already working with a florist, it might be a good idea to go and pick up some wedding magazines, or I know that sounds really old fashioned, doesn't it? But that's still how I think. My default position is, or just go and buy a magazine and it'll tell you. But you'll probably do better on social media, Pinterest, TikTok, that sort of thing, and just get an idea of what the trends are, because weddings are trend led. There are certain colours that are super popular one year and then the next year nobody's doing it. And I don't even know, because I haven't looked up where these trends actually come from, whether they all start on the internet. I mean, it's a bit like fashion. Somewhere, somebody said, oh, we're all going to be wearing purple next year. And then all the shops do everything in purple. And you're like, well, who made that decision? It's a bit like that with these flowers, right? So it depends how complicated you want to make it. But and also it depends on who you're going to be selling them to. But for 2026, your florists will already have their weddings booked in. They will already know the colours that they want. So you need to ask around, and you can always say, we're not working together yet. We don't have an arrangement in place, but could I pick your brains? Tell me what your colour schemes are going to be like for next year. And that will give you an indication, because it's not all pastels. So I haven't had that conversation with my florist yet, but I will do before I order anything. But I could talk about this for hours. It probably should have been an episode in its own right. You may have had enough of this already, but I'm going to list some particular types that I would love to order. Here they go. So in the Viridiflora category, Doll's Minuet is absolutely stunning. In the parrot categories, we've got Vovos, Rasta, Amazing, and Power Parrot. Power Parrot looks incredible. It's like a crazy hot pink. I think that would look amazing. Miami Sunset is a fringed one, so that shouldn't go in the parrot category, but it's kind of the same. Rasta Parrot is hot pink and orange, looks amazing. And Vovos is a kind of apricot pink lilac, which I think would be gorgeous. And then in the peony category, I've got Pink Star or Amazing Grace, Copper Image, Katinka, Mystery Dream, and Nachtwacht. I'm sorry if I murdered that. Nachtwacht, which apparently has a very good vase life. So that is my sort of starting point for what I want to do next year. And I'm going to run it past my florist and see what she thinks. And anything she's like, oh, I don't want that, then I will bear that in mind, and I might just do a smaller volume for selling. We haven't even had a conversation about choosing daffodils for next year. I'll write that down and we can talk about that on another episode, because that's something I'm going to go big on for next year. But in terms of whites, this is a very cunning plan that I've got for 2026. I think they'll be more usable than the yellows. I think the whites are beautiful. So I hope you've taken all that on board. It's a lot, I know. There's just a lot to say. I could talk for hours, to be honest, and I'm conscious that you've probably got to go. So I'm going to wind it up now and say that I will be back on Tuesday. I hope you've had a good growing week and things are going well for you. If you go on social media and it looks like everybody's having an amazing time cutting hundreds and hundreds of bouquets in these gorgeous fields, let me just remind you that bad things are happening to growers all over the place. I know from this group I'm in that somebody's AMI have been wiped out by the carrot fly, which is awful. Somebody else contacted me to say that leather jackets are eating all their things. So regardless of how badly things are going for you, I guarantee that there are lots of other growers who are going through the same thing. They're just not posting about it on social media. Okay, that is it for me. It is the summer solstice here in the UK tomorrow. It's also going to be the hottest day of the year so far tomorrow as well, which is great. Can't wait for that. And that, of course, is the longest day. So the longest day of sunlight that we have. And then after that, well, as my father always used to say, it's all downhill from there. And I have to work very hard to not go around repeating that sentence. It is how I feel deep inside, because I can't stand the winter and I can't stand when the nights start to draw in. And because I'm obviously shutting the chickens up in the evening, I know that the nights start drawing in, and I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. But anyway, there will be lots of people celebrating the solstice tomorrow. So happy summer solstice to you. Have a wonderful weekend. Happy growing, and please come back and join me on Tuesday.